It'll be late, man. You know, black people have a hard time being on time sometimes.
It
You feel
runs
me?
in the blood, bro. It runs in the blood. Like I
You
don't know if
feel me?
y'all seen. I don't know if y'all seen the video of Erica Badu and she gets her tribal test, like seeing like what her tribe was back in Africa.
Ancestry?
Yeah, no, it wasn't ancestry. It's an African one.
23andMe?
Nah. This
No?
African one. It's African specific. And
Oh shoot, that's better. Yeah.
yeah, and
Whoever said that, yeah, it's better.
they um they actually got her to what tribe was I don't remember the exact tribe, but one thing about them that was notoriously known was that they had CP time. And she was like, see, I knew it, man. I knew it. Like she was saying like I knew time was made up by white people, blah blah blah. Like and she so like
Yeah, man, boy, story of my life.
yeah,
Time
I'm
made up by white people.
okay. It's okay when you're late. It's in the
Hey, on a real note with that though, what you're saying, like, yeah, of course, time. We all know that relatively time passes by, but in the Industrial Revolution, they they actually created the workday to create work rhythms in factories. So
Mhm.
like this was going to be the industry of the future for the United States. So they were like, we need these work rhythms, you know. So it was, you know, that part was made up.
Man, it's crazy. One thing that be killing me is just the thought of how they literally manipulate time. Like there's other places in in the world that don't even change the time for the farmers like we do. You know, like they don't have
Yeah,
daily savings and whatnot. So you know, when I found that
yeah.
out, oh, and like the Ethiopian calendar, 7 years difference.
Yeah, they
Oh, really?
behind, right? Like it's not even close
Well,
almost.
I wouldn't want to say behind, but
But
I'll just say
yeah,
different time, different time. So I thought that was pretty cool.
yeah, it's
For
like
real?
2013, bro.
Yeah.
On the Ethiopian
Wow,
calendar.
So I be
wow.
telling people when they be at like, what's your age? I'll be like, man, my body don't, I don't conform to the time of this state, and people be like, what?
And I'm in a whole different zone.
Yeah,
Thomas.
yeah. Don't ask me my age, 'cause I ain't gonna tell you no exact number.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, y'all trying to dive in,
We
you
could dive
know?
in. I was trying to maybe see if some people will come in here. Right now, we don't have any. Doesn't show we have anybody watching.
That's cool. I
Yeah,
mean,
man.
we can chop it up on some current events if y'all want to, until some people come in for the ones that might actually watch this from the beginning until straight to live. You know.
Okay,
Yeah.
what we got? I think. You have anything that you want to say, Zach? I know you had pulled up a
Uh,
couple tabs.
One that I personally know of is like in LA, there was somebody who shot two officers over the weekend. Um,
Real.
yeah, the officers are in. My bad, I'm looking for my charger. The officers were in critical condition. The last I read on the article, and the I think some of the protesters were trying to block them from even like block the ambulance from even getting the people to the hospital, and they were like chanting like they're not verbatim, but something along the lines of like "let them die." Like y'all can look it
Wow.
up too. So
Bruh, what?
yeah, it's wild. Wow. I don't know how
In
to feel about
California.
yeah, I don't know how to feel about that one though, because I know LA County, their sheriff's department, because I forgot if I told y'all, but I've been checking out Dr. Melina Abdullah's graduate Pan African Studies class. She's
Hmm.
been giving it
That's
to the
tight.
people
That's
live.
tight.
Yeah, it's fun because I'm like, shoot, yeah, I'm not in school no more, so it's kind of cool to actually still get that school environment in a sense. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they were discussing about their former LA sheriff named Lee Baca and how he was corrupt and ended up how they had those deputies that deputy gang. Did y'all ever hear about that one? Where they all had like matching
What
tattoos.
bruh, you talking about basically like the fraternal order of police?
Essentially, yeah.
Essentially, bruh. And that is an actual thing. You know, like, and I know from a place of seeing records somewhere, but it's an actual fraternity, you know, and it's like, okay, where did that, where did that come from? Like, why did you know, if you look at the history of the police and then you look at a fraternity being started around it, what were they teaching? What were they talking about? You know what I'm saying? What were they pillars? What were they values?
Yeah,
I don't know, but I mean, some things seem obvious in some ways.
yeah.
I could take a wild guess.
You
Yeah, I
know,
would, I would just like a
crazy.
little more context than the mainstream media may be putting out there, because obviously we're not in LA. But from the little information I know from the people that are in LA, that's in that class, we were just talking about how that whole department is corrupt, and they arrested that sheriff, like he's in prison, but now they got this guy in there named Alex Villanueva, and they said he's just as bad. Like, so the it's kind of like you arrest that one person, but you didn't fix the corruption within the actual department.
And
So,
you said this is in LA,
mhm, mhm.
the LA Police Department.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I just don't know. I would like to some more context. Like, what made that person go pop off on them? Like, the video is online. Like, you can find it. Like, he just literally walked up to the squad, like the SUV, pop, and started running.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yo, that's crazy, man.
So,
Yeah.
I personally don't know how I feel about that.
yeah,
Um, hard to take a
Mm-hmm.
real stance.
yeah,
I mean, I'm not for people just killing people outright, anyways. But
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
So it
Something
seems like we gotta.
something I've been getting into. What you about to say?
Oh no, go ahead, go ahead. I was just about to give a little introduction, but we keep talking.
All right, cool. But yeah, basically, I've been learning more about like the Chinese Revolution, and like I'm like basically this was a whole time period, I think in the 60s or 70s, even probably the 80s too. But yeah, like China was as y'all know, China went from like being like a very poor country into having a high, like very high levels of poverty. Obviously their population is like huge, to having like one of the highest GDPs. Like they have the greatest like economic growth. And
mhm,
Shenzhen is a place there. Like this is like the technology and business capital now, but a lot of their changes started years ago when they were practicing like collectivism type farming and stuff like that. But basically, whenever there is any kind of resistance, there's conflict, and like there's people that were in charge essentially, like, or people that were for the more traditional way of living, fighting with people that wanted to change to collectivism farming. They wanted to change from just independent agrarians growing their own stuff
mhm,
to having people cooperatively own farms. And there was a wave of like trying to kill off people that wanted the traditional way. You know what I'm saying? For the sake of the change, for the sake of change, for the sake of
mhm.
changing to collectivism. You know what I'm saying? The Soviet Union did the same thing. But yeah, that's something that I was recently just like learning about. And two, y'all should get on this too, by the way. Um, container homes. I was talking
Yeah,
with one of my homies the other day, and they were like, "Yo, you got to check out these container homes, man." And I'm like, "Yo, what's up with a container home?" He showed me, and inside is like it's literally containers, right? And they put them
mhm,
together, and they might even stack them too, cut out the inside, decorate, put up walls and stuff like that.
mhm.
They can do this in 2 days, but it looks like a house. It
Nice. It
is
look
it
very
is it
nice.
is a it is a house. And to build 140-foot container home costs about 17,000. The cheapest you can do it for is about $17,000. But that's 140-foot one. If you were to, let's say that one container home costs 17,000. Let's round it to 20. Let's say you spend a lot, 30 20,000 times three for three containers. If you want to do a double wide container and then go upstairs, y'all look it up. Look up container homes on YouTube. they look official, but this is like this changes the way people think of like what is the standard of living. You know what I'm saying? Like when you see these homes and you see how much they don't cost, you're like, oh my goodness. Like people are people are leasing their lives to get homes and they have mortgages. You know, we had our market crashed because of the housing market. You know, of course it was because of how they were treating it, but there was a lot of people had money they couldn't pay into the housing market. You feel what I'm saying? Like, and then container homes.
Mm. Yeah, I like that idea because, and the thing I recently was looking at, those storage units that can be like real big and everything. Like you might drop like the Home Depot, see them big old storage units.
Bruh, I
That's
used to
kind of
look
what
at
they are.
yes.
I was sitting
Bruh, I
there
used to look
looking,
at
like,
those. I used to be in those, hiding in those.
bro, if you set it up, like, that's a house. You set it
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
you just
Yeah, man.
park your
It's
land.
tight.
But I wanted to touch on what you were talking about with the food and everything, because I recently saw a post and it was talking about in Geneva, Switzerland, there was this thing called foodscaping. And the post said each yard is a vegetable and fruit garden that neighbors consult and plan what each will grow so they can trade. And that was kind of something I feel like that related to what you were just now saying, in a sense of them working together in a collectivist sense and farming.
Where is that, bro?
Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland.
Switzerland?
Yes,
Man,
called
Switzerland is,
foodscaping.
you know what I'm saying? They're forward thinking. Yeah, that I mean things like this ended up, you know, of course the revolution, you know, it was violent in some ways. You know, people did die, but also remember there was like the Great Famine too. Like I've been learning more about like I've been combing more through history lately because like I'm just you know, talking to y'all and seeing everything going on, you wonder like, dang, have things always been like this or where did they come from and how did they like kind of evolve to this point? So like I've just been kind of combing through more like random things in history. They had a great famine that went on and you know, really in Europe, like a lot of people died, millions of people died. You know what I'm saying? And this was in a transition to this new system. And then like they were trying to get away from everyone you know, essentially being poor and doing their own kind of farming. But in this process of change, a lot of people died from the Great Famine.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like for real, you know, that it's crazy, but it's interesting to see how they ended up setting up their countries in ways to in an effort to better distribute and allocate their resources. Now, granted, leadership did make things obviously like authoritarian and whatnot, and people's egos got big and whatnot. But the idea there even allowed China to progress as much as they did. You know what I'm saying? And then when you look at, you know what I'm saying? Like, what have we made any radical changes here like that in the United States? I would say during the Civil War, going industrial for sure. Other than that, everything, I mean, technology.
Yeah.
So, you know, 90s to 2000s.
But other countries,
Yeah.
But you know,
Have we done anything radical to change our you know, our systems, you know, and the way we organize people and you know what I'm saying? Like revolutions changed this in countries. Yeah, some people lost the revolutions and people in power stayed, but some people won. You know what I'm saying? And you know, some change really did happen.
I think it'd be interesting, like what something like that could do for like the black community today.
yeah,
I know we have things like community gardens, which are small and few and far between. But have y'all seen the story of the family that bought 90 acres of land,
yeah,
and they plan on
No.
building a community for black people? And I feel like if people start doing stuff like that and start growing their own food, we can develop this type of independence and have control of our most basic need of production is probably food, and that's something that we don't have or we don't own ourselves. But I think something like
Yeah,
that
bro.
can be huge for the black community.
That
yeah.
man,
That's a dream, bro.
most definitely. Most definitely. And I mean, yo, and think about it. look at what Akon's doing. You know what I'm saying? Look at what Chameleonaire's doing. Look
Yeah,
at what Derek Grace is doing. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like
Actually took a loan from China though.
you said Akon did?
Yeah, yeah. He actually just took a loan.
Oh my god.
Your eyes, man. Your eyes.
He just got to come through with it, because if he doesn't, China gonna be owning that stuff. That's the only thing. Like I think a lot of people are kind of like this about China being all in Africa and all the different countries and whatnot, but it's just like either you can look at it as them being screwed over and not learning lessons from the past, or you can look at it from them not falling through on their business deals. And it's kind of like I'm hoping Akon does not get screwed over in that sense.
Wow. Yeah.
Ends
Yeah.
up with more debt. Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see.
But you know what's funny, man? I mean, one, I was just talking about China. I mean, look at the through line. Like I just said what I said, and then you came and said Akon is getting the land from China. He's in Africa. You know what I'm
He's getting
saying?
a loan
China's
from
buying.
China. Not the land, but a loan. He getting a loan from China.
I mean, the loan. Okay, he got a loan from China. I wonder why he went that route. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, it's kind of like how we are with getting our houses. You know, like we obviously don't have, like, a lot of people don't have 300,000 just sitting around. You know, so you get that FHA loan, or you get a loan for your house and everything. You just got to fall through with your side of the deal, like come through with it, so that you don't end up having to give your property back to the bank in foreclosure. You know,
true. But I'm just saying he didn't get a U.S. loan.
I don't think he wants to. Like,
That's what I'm saying. So it was something about whatever the conditions were. Yeah, whatever the deal was, that China was like, hey, we'll rock with you on this. And it had to be something about it that he trusted. So I think, of course, when we think about how the news portrays these other countries, we view them as villains. Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to view Russia as a villain sometimes. You know what I'm saying? But when you really think about it, in World War I and World War II, Russia and the United States were on the same side.
Yep, just like this.
They were fighting together. They were together.
I know we're kind of getting away from the book, but
yeah, I'm sorry.
That's what I've been talking about with people about the book 1984. In that book, they're sitting there, they're in London or England, right? And they're in this place called what's it called? Pacific. I forget what their name is, but they're either fighting East Asia and Eurasia, right? But over time it switches, and the people, they just go along with it, saying like, oh, we've been fighting Eurasia this whole time, or we've been fighting East Asia this whole time, but they really haven't. The government just keeps on flip-flopping on them. And I related that to us because like a few years ago with Obama, you know, we got the loan from China. We were cool with China. It was Russia that we had issues with. And Trump gets in office, then we cool with it with Russia, and now we didn't like China. a little
funny,
bit,
bro.
And then I don't know if you saw recently, but now China and Russia are working on de-dollarizing their system. So they're trying to get away from using the U.S. dollar. So now they're working together. So
they're just trying to take the dollar out specifically.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
interesting.
So it's very interesting actually seeing that transition, because it's like, oh, I thought we weren't cool with Russia. Oh, we cool with Russia. Oh, we don't like China now. But now China and Russia work together. So yeah, it's interesting. It's politics, man. Politics.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that, to touch on the book, I think, going through, what was it, chapter 10, right? Talking about like just the global kind of context of, oppression, and of people who support or advocate for issues in other countries. Like, how, we had Black leaders here at Ida B. Wells and, whatnot, going to other countries, going to Europe and stuff like that, and soliciting support. Yeah. Support for issues. Right. Issues that we had going on here. So like, I mean, that is relevant. And, we can go ahead and, get to this literature, get to this education right here.
Word. So for everybody who's watching and hasn't been here before, we are online book club named Unlocked, and hopefully we don't have to stay online forever. But this is a great way, especially through the current pandemic, for us to connect with people and share ideas and thoughts about important literature that's important to the Black freedom struggle. Um, I'm Jalen, Zach, and KC or Kenny, and we're all UGA grads, and we came to put this together to just help build conversations around these type of topics, such as the ones that Angela Davis talks about in Freedom is the Constant Struggle. So topics about race, revolution, liberation, and the ways we can as average people do things to, kind of create change. So we've been reading Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis, and we are currently about to go over the last couple chapters. And I think it's 3 chapters. We're going over 8, 9, and 10. But after that, we will be taking suggestions for the next book that we're going to read. We'll kind of get y'all's input, and then we'll make a decision tomorrow. But if y'all are interested in coming into the conversation on live with me, Zach, or Kenny, there's a link in the description, and that'll put you right in here, and we'll add you to the stream, and you can talk with us as if you were really here. But also, Haven's right there. She creeping into the screen. She's one of our other members.
What's up, Haven?
What up, Haven?
Hello, hello.
We needed you here. We needed you here, man.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad all worked out. Perfect timing.
Definitely. We need some feminine energy in here. Shout out to Marcus. Shout out to Jenna Marie. Shout out to Jason. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, you did.
Appreciate y'all for being here.
I just noticed we got a new subscriber.
Turn up.
That's either I'm hoping I say this right.
What up, Ramoni?
Kanisha? Is that one of y'all friends?
Kanisha.
Yeah, I know.
Kanisha. What up, Nish?
All right.
What's up? What's up, Nish?
Yeah. So we do this.
Long time no see.
So we do this every other Sunday night at 7:00. Usually we read about 70 pages worth of information. So that breaks down to about 5 pages a day, whether you want to read it all at once or not, do you. But it's something that's very small, a small commitment that eventually will build up to a great outcome. So yeah, if y'all have any questions, if y'all want to get in touch with any of us, just feel free to message us on IG. You can really, at Unlocked TBC, and we'll get back with y'all.
But true, Zach. You're right. You got to put it out there. Unlocked TBC. You got to say it like that.
Go ahead. If not already, go ahead and subscribe, just like Kanisha did. Go ahead and give us a little like. Go ahead and do that little thumbs up. It don't take that much to support. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead. Go ahead. Go do it. But
man, like, you silly, bro.
Alright, so I think it's a good point for us to get into it. So chapter 8 was about feminism and abolition, theories and practices for the 21st century. Anybody have any particular part in this chapter where y'all want to start?
I personally loved how she started off talking about Assata Shakur and being in Chicago, and how she basically was giving a little historical context behind Chicago's support for Assata back in the day, when she was a part of I forgot what they called it. Was it the Panther? I think they called them the Panther 21 back in the day, and how Chicago actually supported her back then, and was just giving actual context on how she was actually innocent. For those that don't know, Assata Shakur was once a part of the Black Panthers, ended up getting into a legal situation, and they had like the Panther 21 that was locked up in New York. I think for her case specifically, she was put in prison on a false charge, saying that she shot a police officer, but she didn't. True. Like she in the book, she gives evidence of how she couldn't because her hand was paralyzed. She already had her her hands up in the air. It was shot. It was
And she
Shot in
was
the
paralyzed.
back,
shot.
right?
Yeah, she was shot already.
Yeah. So I
Or
really,
is she still paralyzed to this day? I'm not sure.
that's a good question.
She is ducked off, man.
But the thing about that whole thing though is that I loved how she mentioned how they were putting her back on the FBI's top 10 most wanted terrorists list.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, why are you putting this woman in Cuba on the terrorist list when she's 60 something years old, just trying to relax for the rest of her life, and then putting a bounty on her head at the same
Mm-hmm.
time?
And they also did didn't they do on the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party?
Right.
Yeah.
It's really a statement more than anything to anybody who wants to challenge the system in the ways in which she did. That you might face the same type of fate. I think she said right now she's in Cuba. Is she like in her 60s?
It's probably 70s now
Probably
because
so.
that was 5 years
Yeah,
ago when this book was written.
she's older now. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she got out the right way. But yeah, I like the point that Angela was making, Miss Davis, excuse me. But y- um but yeah, she made a point really about just the fact that like in the context of like the Boston bombing, like this bomb that went off, and the nation's supposed to be, essentially chasing somebody else, chasing a man. They thought the fact that they thought it important to put her on the top 10 most wanted list, it said a lot, that they chose, even when something else really could have been the choice. You know what I'm saying? Or another focus could have been a choice for who to target as a terroristic threat, but they chose to name her and Asada on the FBI's most wanted list, which classifies them as imminent threats to the United States as terrorists. They're named as terrorists. And so I thought that was interesting that, she chose to focus on how sexuality and the fact that she was a woman played a role, and the fact that she was Black played a role. And she kind of talks about that when she gets into like more gender issues about like how, sex plays an intersectionality with race and the oppression that women feel, that Black women feel specifically. You know what I'm saying? And the other layer to that is trans women, and so she does a good job of really like laying it out like, hey, this is the intersectionality, and this is how all these parts play a role, and like what that meant for me and what that meant for Asada.
Definitely. I just want to highlight Marcus's comment real quick. While the chapter made me appreciate our women that much more, they are warriors for justice, most definitely. And it seems like they've always been the people, unfortunately, behind the scenes when they seem like they're doing a lot of most of the work.
All right,
So,
for sure.
Reoccurring theme in history.
Good comment. All right.
But yeah, she brings up the point of the Chicago police and how many people they've killed and shot in the past X amount of years. And I kind of made an Instagram story about this, but it just makes me think about like, why are they making them why are they making activists the terrorists when the state appears to be the real terrorists? And
Right.
and what does that do to the psychology of the people in America who watch the news and subscribe to all these things?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just for context, again, the book was written in 2015, and the quote that he's referring to is when she talks about how the department they shot 253 people.
Chicago police.
Right, the Chicago Police Department. It says 63 people have been killed by the CPD in the last 4 years. So back to 2011, another 253 have been shot, 172 Black people, and 27 Latinos. So as you see, that's a major disproportionate number. I don't know if most people know, but not all of Chicago is just like Black people. Like I know how the media may seem like it's the most black on black crime area, whatever, but I know there's from my conversations with people from Chicago, there's different areas just like how Atlanta is. And not all of Chicago is just black people. So that shows that they're also policing that area a little different, just like how they do down here.
Yeah, south side.
To go back to when you guys were referring to, or Kenny was talking about the transgender community for when Angela was mentioning it, she writes on, it says it's like the third, fourth page of chapter 8. But she says, we thought that by, like, this is in the context of when Black and brown and Latina women were trying to get into the feminism realm. And it's like they're fighting to get into the category of women, but like she addresses how that wasn't enough. Like we fight for inclusivity, but then we also have to realize that that category of women is very restrictive and very holds oppression even in that category. So it's like they fight for more than just getting involved. They fight to expand it. So I thought that was a very, like she says, we thought that by doing that, we would have effectively addressed the problem of exclusivity of the category. What we didn't realize then was that we would have to rewrite the whole category rather than simply assimilate more women to an unchanged category of what counts as women. So I think that helped wrap up like what we have to do more to integrate the trans women into the community to make sure they feel as though that women is not just something that is assigned at birth, that it involves way more than just your reproductive organs. So I really appreciate her just bringing in that part of it.
I'll give you some more room. Go ahead, right there in the logo.
Right. True. I was thinking that, Zach.
No, that's good. Now we can actually see it with the white walls.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's exactly the part that I was referencing. Actually, I didn't quote it. I'm glad that you quoted it. But yeah, that's exactly what I was referencing. And it really speaks to like, she's like, oh, we can't just, it's not just about like putting more women in a category. It's like, okay, hey, let's break down and restructure how we even think about a category of women. And, you know, I'm gonna be honest. When I read that, and I've known this about myself before now, but when I read that, I was like, I don't even know where to begin doing that. You know, as a, like, you know, and me being a man has a lot to do with it, but what does that even look like? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know where you even start with that. And then when you even start talking about, I mean, I can empathize with, okay, hey, if somebody's feeling like they don't feel like themselves or they feel outside of their body in a trans situation, but redefining, somebody said, oh yeah, biology isn't enough to just distinguish between sex and even, you know, gender and even sex. You get what I'm saying? I don't even know where to start having a conversation beyond that, you know, for like, okay, hey, how do you expand this, or how do you rewrite this category of woman? And then to the extent that Angela talks about like what this means for like prisoners, like transgender women prisoners, it's like, oh man, like that brings up an issue of oppression that's still relevant. You know, it's oppression, you know, whether racial or sexual.
And I just want to highlight a couple comments real quick. I see Marcus even said, I couldn't imagine identifying as a woman and being sent to a men's prison.
Because even in that institution, they're treated as though, like what they would stereotypically treat women as. Like they treat those transgender women as women, but don't allow them to identify as women, which is odd.
Right. So how do you, you know, how do you restructure that? You know, is it don't get me to just walling out up here. I don't know. And you know, I don't want to offend anybody, but yeah, I don't know how to even say that. Like, okay, even conceptually, like what you're just saying. So is it just based on what you acknowledge as far as gender or sex? You know what I'm saying? You know, it's just, okay, hey, well, I want to be called a woman now. Does that make me a woman? You know what I'm saying? And if I went to jail, where would I end up? and what experience would I have, and you know, it's just interesting to even have to think about that, really.
Yeah, she talks about how we have to let go of what we like currently know to be normal, and that we shouldn't get attached to the concepts of gender, and that there is really embedded in society, political context, cultural context, ideological formations, and she says that gender is non-binary, and the category of women has to change so it doesn't reflect normative ideas. So, I mean, for me, this was like an eye-opening conversation because this isn't really a realm of information that I'd ever really delve into personally. Um,
It makes me
but
actually question though, like, what would we do if it was vice versa? Where if it was a woman that was transitioning into a man, or that has transitioned into becoming a man, and then she ends up in prison, would they put her in a male's prison, or would they put her into a women's prison? And then, and actually going off of like one of the issues that was brought up in the show Orange is the New Black was whether or not that the person that is trans that's in prison is actually going to get those medical treatments that they actually need to continue living their life. Um, so like, what would happen if the woman that would transition into a man was put into a men's prison, but then since she's not getting that testosterone treatment, and she ends up having her estrogen levels back up again, or would they put her in the women's prison? And like, it's an interesting question for me.
Bruh, that happened in the show.
Yeah. Laverne Cox, her character ended up in a position once where she wasn't getting her treatments. Hormones were going crazy, and well, I won't say I don't want to use the term crazy, but they were were becoming an issue for her in the show.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that that's they put that in the show just because it happens in real life. So
Facts. Wow. Dang. So where you watch Orange is the New Black?
I used to.
That's cool, bro. Hey, bro, I'm not judging you.
Nah, that show was one of those political shows. They had a lot of moments in there, like if anybody that's watching did watch Orange is the New Black, when Pusey died, and she was
watching.
Man, that was a sad episode, man, because she literally was saying, "I can't breathe," just like Eric Gardner, just like George Floyd, just like and just like how our art mimics or reflects society and vice versa. That's basically what Orange is the New Black was trying to do with a lot of their episodes. So,
man, I can respect that. Wow. And it
and
was
that
at
phrase
that
is heavy.
time. I can't breathe, man. What?
You keep hearing it, man. I don't know if y'all seen that video like yesterday of the cop smashed the dude's face saying, "I can't breathe," man. I think that's a phrase that'll haunt me forever, man. To be honest.
Man.
I noticed there's a lot of T-shirts out there that say "I can't breathe" on it and whatnot, but I did see somebody make a post one. I can't recall who, but they were like, I don't know what y'all believe in, but we are people that believe we can manifest things. And so like being careful of what we actually speak, because our words, they're pretty powerful. It's the first thing God gave us, depending on what you believe in. And they were like, yo, you won't catch me having on a "I can't breathe" shirt or a hat, because I'm not about to manifest that in my life. So I was thinking the same. I was like, wow, I didn't even think of that. But I have to wear that now.
You can think of it in multiple type of ways. You could also, I think, could also be taken
you're right.
from the standpoint of standing in solidarity with those people.
Mm.
I can wear something else in solidarity.
That's true.
I can wear something else. I got my skin. My skin is my solidarity with you.
That's not enough sometimes.
True. Who was it? Which word? I forget which feminist it was when she said all skin folk ain't kinfolk. We've been saying that ever since. So I see
that's not what she was saying.
Oh yeah, Marcus's question's a very good question.
Y'all see his question?
Where is it?
Do y'all think we will ever have non-binary options on licenses, etc.? I've heard that now that even if you identify one way, if you haven't had the change, you can't change your license. Is that something that we should push for?
Even sometimes if you have the change, I was watching a Queer Eye episode for someone in Athens, and even though he had the change, they would not let him go in to change it because they knew he had transitioned. So once he got into the episode of Queer Eye, all that production, the cameras, they allowed him to change it. But before then, they were not. They were creating all this like paperwork and like restrictions as to like that wouldn't allow him, even though he had the surgery already.
You talking about the guy with the orange hair?
Yeah.
I used to work with him at the Georgia Center.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
That's cool.
He's awesome.
That's cool.
It's crazy how small the world really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how a lot of people don't realize. One of the things that she mentioned in the book that the feminist said was the personal is political.
Man, she says that multiple times too. I think that's an important concept for us to go over.
Yeah, we should touch on that because I want to touch on that and touch on like, is business personal?
Yes, definitely. Everything like, especially with like, for instance, someone like Bezos, like that's a businessman, but everything he does impacts our lives. Like he's in
our personal lives.
Yeah, it definitely impacts us. So.
Yeah.
I actually was talking to my students about that this past Friday, because I've actually been letting them peep in on Dr. Melina Abdullah's Pan-African Studies class, and we were just talking about politics, and I brought up that same quote, and they were kind of asking like, what does that actually mean? So my class is a majority young ladies class, and it's a majority of young ladies in the class, so I like to be like a guide and be like real with my students and whatnot. So I was just saying, like, for you ladies as young Black women, you may face things in life that other people aren't going to face. And I was telling them how I asked them in the sense of, do you believe women have the right to an abortion or not? And apparently my students are a little into politics, and they were like, yeah, they should have the right to. And I was saying, well, thing is, in politics, somebody's actually controlling whether or not you can or cannot do that, whether what you can or cannot do with your body. And that is your personal opinion, your personal life, your personal choice. But some old, most likely white man in Congress is sitting there governing whether or not our women in this country can what they can and can't do with their bodies.
Wow,
so I feel like that was the best or easiest example I could use, although there's a plethora more.
Right. But no, I think, man, Zach, you putting your kids on this, man. This is crazy. Like just to even understand. I mean, but think about that. You know what I'm saying? Like I have a little cousin. She just turned 4. Her birthday was September 8th, right? And for her to be able, like, you know, she's younger, but I know she's aware of and can process more than people might expect. So you with your kids, how old are your kids? Your students?
11 through 16-year-olds.
Man, that's a lot of them are gonna get it, but being able to put it so plainly like that, you know what I'm saying, to understand, you know, that's crucial. That's what we need to see how that connects, because you don't get that from a regular history class,
right?
You don't get that, you know, and it's no politics class until you get to college, you know, but by then, even that's history. And you might not get the connections until you really start thinking critically to even know that there's more to think about, you know. But yeah, go ahead. You were about to say something.
I'll say just even on the younger scale, because I was teaching 3rd grade here in Athens 2 years ago, and students, she I miss them, dog. But one of my students, she was a young Hispanic female, a young lady, and we would talk about, like, she was very aware of ICE. She was very aware of how politics did impact her personal life. And another thing that, like, for instance, this is kind of something of just showing how intellectual these students are and how they think and whatever. I used to actually just have regular conversations with them, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's Shorty over blah blah blah," and I'm just talking like regular talk. I'm saying like Shorty and blah blah blah.
Kids be picking up on it, boy.
Yeah. And one day I actually, and when I used back then when I was saying Shorty, I was talking about women my age and blah blah. But one day I just was calling her, like I was like, "Bro, you little Shorty," but I was using it in the context of her being short. But she was like, "Don't call me that." Like I noticed how you used that word before, and you were talking about other grown women before. Like, don't call me that. I was like, you know what?
You know what? You're right.
I'm not gonna call you that anymore. You're right. Like, even that, I understand. Like, from even I meant to just say like you as being short, but you're intelligent enough to actually put two and two together and say like you shouldn't be calling me that. So I was like, yeah, I won't anymore. I respect that.
All right.
So,
Right.
So I believe like our students are always, or our youth is always knowledgeable and about how the politics work and how it impacts our personal lives if you introduce it to them. But we're just looking at history as dates and old people we don't even care about no more.
Man, you know what? I'm gonna try to tie this back to what we were talking about, which relates to the book. I'm kind of good at stuff like that. But okay, so look, and I'm gonna put it in terms of this. What we were talking about was business being personal, and what was the other thing you said, Zach?
Personal. The personal is what she said. What's the quote again?
Political. Personal is political. That personal is political went to is business personal went to teaching kids about politics. That is all related because that phrase personal is political and business is personal. Those are like mental models that we use for guiding someone's understanding of how something works. You know what I'm saying? And even to the extent of like gender or sex, there's certain things that we say, oh, you're not supposed to wear blue, or oh, you don't want that to be your favorite color, or to as small as decorating your girl's room pink, your boy's room is blue. Those are simple examples, but and I think in kind of reworking this category, we have to question certain things that we do, as far as like alluding to certain mental models for our youth to understand. And those mental models are as simple as like phrases or subtle things, like you were saying, Zach, subtle things that kids pick up on about our potential bias or way of thinking about something, our mental models, our scripting, you know what I'm saying? How are we talking? What are the small details for that we set for the binaries we create, whether that's between gender or race, Boom.
That's a good point, bro. I see Marcus also tied it back to the book as well. And
what did he say?
He's talking about how Angela mentioned the kids who led a march. And they were youth facing the fire hoses and dogs as well. It's definitely a big impact.
And I was taking a English class where we did a lot of work with studying the historical Black communities in Athens, and we were learning about how even in Athens, when the varsity was downtown, right where the Chick-fil-A was, and the KKK was marching up and down Broad Street with their rifles, it was kids that were sitting, like children between 16 and 20, that were out there protesting and sitting in at the varsity. And I think it's understated how, and it's understated how much like just normal people have like such a big role. And she talks about how, you know, people like in neoliberalism, just a lot of individuals are highlighted, and it's really the ordinary
Facts.
people that carry on the will of the movement.
Facts,
Um,
man. Yo, good stuff, Jalen. Yo, cause in talking about that, man, cause like when I talked to you earlier, bro, and we were talking about everybody being able to play a role in any capacity in fighting this type of oppression and leading any revolutionary type movement. But and Angela goes on this, she says it in the book. She's like, we need to be really careful, like you were alluding to, we need to be really careful of the emphasis we place on the heroes, because a lot of the people that were their followers, or a lot of people that pushed the movements and made the waves behind them, were the movers and shakers as well. And it wasn't about that heroes, it was about that hero's presence, but it wasn't solely based on that hero that change was able to occur. And when we emphasize people as heroes alone, when we lose them, the momentum stops, you know. And she's trying to help kind of prepare us for like thinking past just one hero. You know, it's not just the one hero, you know, it's the hero that started the movement that caused other people to follow, you know. It was all of that, you know. And I think it's important to kind of think about.
I remember. Oh, you want to go?
I was just gonna say that she kind of brings that up in chapter 9 when she talks about Martin Luther King, and she said what she loved about Martin Luther King was that he learned from like the collective movement, and he didn't see himself as the single individual who was just gonna provide, you know, Black people with freedom. He understood the importance of the collective movement, and I probably need more leaders like that.
I believe it was in chapter 7 or chapter 6. I really forget who she was quoting, but when she said strong people don't need strong leaders, and basically just talking about how we can be strong as a collective together so that we don't have to just have those one or two individual leaders like that. So yeah,
man. So go ahead, Kenny.
You knew I was gonna say something.
Yeah, we got a little
Wait, I look
rotation
like I
going.
wanted to hop into the screen.
I heard that.
I was like, you were like, oh shoot. Nah, it's really quick. I've been looking at and studying, like, I sent y'all some of this stuff too. Self-organizing systems, right? Emergent systems with emergent properties, right? So if you think about, this is so cool to me. I'm sorry, I just had to tell y'all this. If you think about this, a school of fish or a flock of birds, right?
Yeah.
That is so amazing. If you don't believe me, please go look it up, and go look up self-organizing systems. But the thing is, everyone's a leader and no one's a leader in a school of fish, right? Everyone's a leader and no one's a leader, you know, because
you gotta explain that.
Man, this is so cool though. So if you think about how a school of fish move, what emergent systems or self-organizing systems have as qualities is this: there are simple rules that all individuals follow that create this overall collective behavior, right? So for the fish, it is stay close and keep swimming. Now, if a shark is coming towards this school of fish, there are times when that school of fish will separate and make a circle, because the fish closest to whatever that stimulus was reacted, and the fish around reacted the same way. So it opened up and that shark swam through, and then they came back together, right? And then wherever that school of fish went after that was where they went. But the leaders of whoever were creating that circle, they were the leaders in that moment, right? And then everyone started following, and then everyone started following the leaders, and then they lead and they follow too. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's this continuous. Okay, so like everyone's responding, in an organized way to create an overall effect. So everyone was a leader and no one was a leader, because you could snatch one of those fish off and that school is still going to move. It's still going to swim. You know what I'm saying? You could throw something at the school of fish from one side and the fish over on that left side will move, and that will cause a collective movement of the other fish. You could do the same thing on the right side, the bottom, the top, the middle, wherever.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you want in a mass movement for revolution, is you want, if a leader falls, the next person takes the place, and or anybody can take the place. And I think that's kind of what Angela Davis is pushing for, at least in her writings.
I wanted to touch on one thing that she talked about back then that has also recently had a reoccurrence, in a sense, just how history repeats itself. She talked about the New Jersey Four, which was 4 young Black lesbians who were she said they were just walking around having fun in Greenwich Village, but ended up in prison because they defended themselves from male violence. I know recently in California, again, we keep going back to California, but I know recently out there, there were these, I think it was 3 trans women one night, or in these back-to-back nights, that were attacked by males, like men, and Black men at that. And other men were just recording, laughing, stealing their phone, like making them pay for their phone back. And some reports later came that I think it was the DA wasn't going to actually press charges on these guys. Right? They let them go. Just how this was a very similar situation where it was 4 lesbians, they trying to defend themselves. Now we had 3 trans women that were trying to defend them. They were literally just having a good night, and some guys just started picking on them, terrorizing them. And that's one of those things that I feel as though we need to come to one accordance on like, we actually need to be like leaders in those situations and step up and actually be that change and be like, yo, this ain't cool, or like knocking that person out, like doing something, because I don't know how, like I don't know how somebody can literally sit there and watch these women be terrorized like that. Like, I don't know if y'all saw the video or not, but it was.
No, I haven't.
No, and I think this is a good example of how the political is personal. Like the fact that the DA, I don't mess with DAs. I think DAs got to be some of the most twisted people in the judicial system. But so the DA won't prosecute these guys. So that leaves the guys that are standing there recording. That gives them the they don't feel like nothing's wrong with it. The legal system don't feel like nothing's wrong with it. I feel like that's a great example of how those things correlate.
Yeah. It definitely sends a message. Like, it's like, oh shoot, I can get away with this.
It's fine to terrorize things that aren't the norm.
Right.
It's a trend.
With that, the political, before we move on, I think we're getting to the end of that chapter almost. I know she brings this point up again about talking about the personal is political, but she talks in the ways in which institutional violence kind of shifted from a system level down to a personal level. And that's something I thought of a lot of time when I think about, I watched this movie in one of my Black film classes. And I probably said this before, but it's a guy and he experiences racism at work. And in turn, that turns to him,
we did talk about
having frustrations with his wife at home. And I think I see that a lot in the Black community where, violence from police might turn to violence in your home environment. Or, I think something with, your boss could turn into you being violent with your child. But I think it's interesting the way she just puts that in the context of politics. And that's something I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah, bro.
She talks about understanding the connections between public and privatized violence. And I think she talks about, she's probably alluding to like G4S and the police and the prison industrial complex. And she says that incarcerating individual perpetrators doesn't do anything more than reproduce violence that they haven't committed, that they have committed. So I just thought that was an interesting framework to put that personal, I mean, the political is personal with them.
And ultimately, when you look at, I guess, the nature of politics is based off of personal interest. You know what I'm saying? Everyone being able to at least agree on a system that will govern everyone, but also benefit them, right? And so, I think just like kind of like the warring between like, okay, understanding like having a personal situation and not having access to the political conversation is a major problem. You know what I'm saying? Which is why matters have become physical. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the most immediate way to act. So
I want to highlight Marx's comment. It's all a consequence of the individualism embedded in Eurocentric culture. I think that's something that we could really dive into, but maybe like
she comments. Angela comments on that specifically.
Yes, she does. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know at the end of this chapter, she says people of color have to unlearn the assumption that racism is individual. And I think that's important for Black people to do, but I think that's also important for white people to do.
Right.
Anybody wants to learn about that, read Kwame Ture's Black Power. He mentions it in like the first 3 chapters, and they're like the first people to actually mention that before all these other scholars got to it. But our Black scholars been saying it first. Just had to put that in there.
I actually got into a debate with my professor about it because she had this question saying that, do you believe, or not believe, is individual racism declining while like institutional racism is increasing? And I was like, false, because like they're both increasing, or like they're like it, like I don't think that individual racism is decreasing. And she was like, actually studies show that it's more of an institutional thing than an individual thing. And I was like, no, like even if you have those studies, you have to understand like there's still implicit bias. Like if I'm looking at something, like how can you really measure racism? Like if I'm looking, exactly, Kenny, that was my face. Like I sent her all these articles.
I've been looking, boy.
Like it was just the fact that she really thought a white woman was going off of studies, and I'm like, but it's my daily experience. So it's like, right. Are you not watching the news?
On top of that, who makes the institution?
Exactly, who makes
people are the institution.
Yeah, and we have to give people a real definition of racism and how the ism reflects the system. Mm-hmm. So, like, individual racism still, alludes to the system. So the institutions provide the frameworks for the individuals to live out their daily lives, and then vice versa. The individuals make up the institutions. So I think they're interconnected.
Freaking believable, yo! Like,
yeah, this is the
honestly.
What does she teach?
She teaches intro to sociology.
Ooh, no,
she's struggling.
So honestly, but the reason why I was reacting like that from Jump Street, because just the fact of the matter that was the studying the difference between the two, when we're all saying that they're one and the same. just to even make people think that there's a difference, to even bring that thought up as an educator in people's mind as an introduction to your course. That's why I was already blown when you said what the study was. You feel me?
Yeah.
I guess it gives a false sense of reality where people, it kind of goes back to Ibram X. Kendi's book, when people be talking about like, I'm not racist. So individually they may think I'm not racist, but you're not anti-racist. You kind of still contribute to the actual perpetuation of this white supremacist system that we have here.
It's more like I'm not like prejudiced, or I don't directly discriminate against people. That's more of an accurate statement than saying like I'm not racist or racism isn't individual.
Right. Mm-hmm. and try to tell people even black people can be racist, bro. Like not in the sense of racist. Before somebody jump on me in the comments, not in the sense
Did
of
you see how Haven looked at you?
having power to. What? My bad, bro. What you say?
I said, did you see how Haven looked at you?
Nah, bro. I'm trying
It was like,
for the ones that have not read Stand from the Beginning.
I'm playing. I'm playing.
He basically outlines how black people can still be or contribute to racism by continuing or perpetuating the system in itself, or those ideals, or not in a sense of like we can we're oppressing white people,
like an anti-blackness type of thing.
yeah.
For an
it's kinda-
example?
You said
As an example. No, I was saying, is that like?
Oh, as an yeah. For instance, like when somebody may sit there in the back in the like a long time ago may have thought like, you know, a black person gonna be in the MLB, right? They can't compete with them or something, or just some let me think.
No, bro, I get what you're saying.
What?
I hear you.
It's just
What?
if you're doing anything that's anti-black and you're black, then that's still like an act of racism. You're oppressing your own people. Like, why? You don't have to do that. You like open your like we're trying to do, unlock your mind.
Is that the difference between prejudice and like racism?
No.
Yeah, I think so.
Right, because I'm just saying, like, because when we always talk about that, like, at least in my courses, like, we never like black people just can't be racist in terms of power, because that's what's in the term. Right. So it's like, can't anti-blackness just be prejudice against oneself? Like, does it have to be racist?
Boom! I like that.
If y'all give me one second,
because I have no power against you to do anything. Right. I don't date dark. Anyway, like I don't have any power.
No. I mean, basically, yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, it's essentially, it's not racism because we don't have any power, but it is a prejudice against ourselves, a hatred ultimately of ourselves. And the ultimate way of doing that is like in many ways selling out. Like when you think about capitalism and the commodification of things, black people have always been commodified. And when we buy into that commodification, and then when we buy into the other prejudice, we end up doing it to ourselves. And so now we're involved in a system, you know what I'm saying? And we're perpetuating it. No, that is not the problem. Right? That is not the problem. It is a problem that black people have to deal with, but the problem is the system that created that kind of cycle. You know what I'm saying? That presented that idea and created the environment, you know, for us to react in those kinds of ways. So when you say, oh, a black person can't be in the MLB, oh, okay, now that comes from something that has existed. You know, we were responding to that, you know. Go ahead, Zach.
I wanted to actually define power for people, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that it is just a power game. Like racism is a power game at the end of the day. It's like it doesn't. A lot of people, it don't even really matter if they like or don't like black people. It's at the end of the day, it's all about power. And Dr. Wade Nobles, he has said, power is the ability to define reality and have others respond to it as if it were
it is their reality.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. Then another one.
Say that one more time for me. Say that one more time.
Oh man, I done got away from my note, bro. Like, all right, he said power is the ability to define reality and have others respond to it as if it were their own. So that's when it comes down to like the power to define. Again, when going back to biblical terms, what's the first thing God gave Adam? The power to define. He said, go out and name everything. Therefore, like if a white person says like the sky is green, and I'm sitting there saying, dang, I thought it was blue, but they've been telling me it's green, and everybody else says it's green, and I have to assimilate to it being green. They have power. Huey P. Newton.
Oh my gosh.
Huey P. Newton also said power is the ability to define phenomena and to make these phenomena act in a desired manner. So that's also going back to like you describing back in the day where they may have eugenics, like describing us through eugenics and then manipulating all of our minds around eugenics and everything. Like, I think that essentially is power. Like, somebody, I don't. That's why a lot of times, man, and I'm sidetracking, but I tell people, man, I know I'm smarter than Bill Gates. I know I'm smarter than. If y'all ever listen to that man, I know I'm smarter than that.
Man, Bill Gates is a genius, bro.
With technology, when it comes to social issues, man, that man need to go somewhere.
Y'all can be geniuses together, bro.
Okay, this is probably off. This definitely, it's off.
It goes back to the individualism.
Oh yeah, it goes back to Marx's point about it's all consequences of individualism embedded in Eurocentric culture. So Angela Davis, she mentions in this one part where she said, oftentimes people say, well, if it takes that long, I'll be dead. So what? Everybody dies, right? And if people who were involved in the struggle against slavery, I'm thinking about people like Frederick Douglass or Ida B. Wells in the struggle against lynching, if they had that very narrow individualistic sense of their own contributions, where would we be today? And so we have to learn how to imagine the world in terms that are not restricted to our own lifetimes.
Yeah.
So I guess that goes back to power in a way of you like seeing your reality. Like, I don't know, Kenny, you tied in.
make that make sense. Do that.
I that last night though.
Yeah.
We were talking about in a sense of where people they don't realize how one stream of may be a part of contributing to our downfall. Like, one stream of a song still gives money to our oppressors. Or like, and I try to tie it into like financial markets. When you're talking about stock markets, like, we're all alchemists in that sense. We manipulate that. Like, if we all want to sit there and be like, yo, everybody put your money in Apple, Apple's going to skyrocket. You know, like, even though one individual may not, but once everybody's thinking that same way. So if you're thinking like, well, my one thing doesn't impact the world, and 90% of the rest of the world thinks that same thing, like, my one instance of listening to this song, or my one instance of buying something from what's a company that we know is Republican?
Fox.
What part is it?
Fox. Fox is a good example. Media, that's a good example.
Yeah. Me watching Fox ain't gonna change anything. It's like, if everybody thinks that way, no, it ain't gonna change anything. Like, but if we actually started getting out of that individualistic mindset like that, and actually started thinking like, let me actually be different. Let's do something different, like our exceptional leaders in the past. Like, I tell people all the time, the only reason they're exceptional is because we're not doing it. Like nobody else just wanted to do that. Like, we can do those same things. Like, we still flesh, blood and blood. We still got the same things. Everybody bleeds red. Why can't you do that? Why can't you think differently and not sit there and play into the system?
Yeah, bro, I agree. Emergent properties, bro. Emergent properties. When several pieces come together to create a whole. All these, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And you know what? That's something that fundamentally businesses understand, because think about collective action at scale, or think about individual action at scale, but all the individuals are on one accord. That's what create, like you're talking about financial markets, that's what creates the movements in the markets. That's what creates growing revenues. That's what puts people in office. You know what I'm saying? Like, individual actions in the same direction at scale. So, you know, if we're talking about standing up against oppression, or we're talking about organizing differently or creating different institutions, that's got to happen individually and collectively. But you can't put individual before collective and that work out. You know what I'm saying? And two, as far as power and reality goes, and our kids, man, this is something I think about, is to not allow this will tie it in to what Haven was saying, but I do not want personally for a reality that was defined for my ancestors or defined for me in a lot of ways to impact the way that I think about caring for my kids or the people that come after me. Like I want to be able to, you know what I'm saying, take care of them and define a new reality. I don't want to only be a part of perpetuating the status quo for myself and even for them. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm doing what I can now, you know, to change it for me and then to ultimately change it for them.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and so yeah, don't let that reality transcend generations.
Exactly. Well, it's crazy people don't like. I guess you don't think of what you don't know or what somebody like may have introduced you to or anything. So, but my bad, Jalen. I know you about to say something.
I was just gonna say that like it's just like the power of planting a seed almost, because you know it's easy to get discouraged when you're fighting for activism and you don't see direct change. And I think what Angela is saying is like, you know, while these people were fighting, while IDB was fighting against lynching, or
And
while
freaking New Zealand, where was she at? Europe?
I think she said
Somewhere like
Switzerland
that.
or something like that.
Switzerland, yeah.
And while Douglas was fighting for abolition support overseas, you know, there were still people at home in terrible conditions. So you're not going to see you're not going to reap the benefits of which of what you plant immediately. It's going to take time. And this is something that just struck me about Obama when he left. I don't remember what speech it was, but I remember him saying that like, you're not going to see the effects of what my presidency did right now. Like you're going to see it 50, 100 years down the line.
Exactly.
Like as the president of the United States, he's put into a box. So he couldn't necessarily create the direct impact that people might have wanted to see. So it's easy to like be like, man, Obama, he didn't really do nothing. But I think I can't remember if it was Angela or I was listening to a book by Dick Gregory, but you got to think about the kids who their whole lives they've known nothing but a black president. Like if you were born in like 2008, you never seen anything but a black president until Trump. So those kids are growing up. They were like, "Wow, like
maybe even 2000
a white guy could be president." You know,
interesting.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's important that, you know, even though we might be fighting for Black Lives Matter, and personally, I feel hopeless seeing all the protests, all the activism, and then, you know, yesterday I'm seeing black people saying I can't breathe on cell phones, et cetera, and I think it's just important for the strength of the movement to understand that it might not come immediately, but you just got to keep fighting. You got to stay constant with the cause.
Yeah, like even, and I'm gonna say this, and we can get back to. I'm sorry, I just keep bringing up points. So Black Lives Matter, that like that phrase, even that hashtag. I know she mentioned something about people who started movements and stuff like that, but that phrase means something stronger today. It's always meant something, but the things that have happened recently, Ferguson, Minnesota, wherever you want to go, all of these events have brought another context to Black Lives Matter, because it was like people heard it and they're like, okay, Black Lives Matter. It's like, okay, even people were like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. And then there's people like, no, Black Lives Matter. And then there's people like, no, all lives matter, you know. And then it's like, oh wait, this guy died at the hands of the police. It got on camera. This guy got shot in the back 7 times. Oh, this guy got choked out. Black lives freaking matter. You know what I'm saying? That adds a whole new context to it. But who was thinking about that? You know, who was thinking about that then? You know, like, you know, the 3 ladies who started it. You know, I'm sure they probably knew, like, hey, you know, this is needed to create these kinds of movements and give meaning to that. Because when you say those 3 words, it's referring to this whole time period, if you think about it. You know what I'm saying? Like when Black Lives Matter was something to even talk about or debate, you know. So, you know, the effects of our seeds.
Yeah. I just going towards something about the youth again. She does have one paragraph in here where she says, corporations profit and poor communities suffer. Public education suffers. Public education suffers because it is not profitable according to the corporate measures. Public health care suffers. if punishment can be profitable, then certainly healthcare should be profitable too. This is absolutely outrageous. It is outrageous. And I think when we had one of our first episodes, when Courtney was on, and she was talking about how all the corporations are starting to put Black Lives Matter on their stuff, and they're saying like now it is profitable to actually say that because they know for a fact some black people are going to go buy like some NBA gear that says Black Lives Matter on it, or some NFL gear that says Black Lives Matter, but actually helping out our education system isn't profitable, so it's like they're not going to do it.
Bro.
So when you like, why do we still have world hunger? Well, it's not profitable to help it. It's more profitable to keep it.
Oh my gosh.
To help it. You know, like I feel like all of this really could be changed if it was possible to make it profitable to just be good.
Profitable. Bro, that is the fundamental issue with a capitalist society. That is a fundamental issue, is that it's got to make money in order for it to make sense. Now I have to try to persuade you that helping people is something you should do as a human. I have to persuade you as a human that helping people is something that you should do as a human because of an idea that you can make money.
Yeah, that's all it's about, man.
That's the freaking issue.
If that's the source, how much does it really help people? If it's about you amassing wealth, you know?
And that's individualistic. Tie it back to the book. But you know, like that's what upsets me, Zach. You know, like that kind of mentality, you know, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't
understand. Our national, my bad. Go ahead. Oh, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Our national budget, our federal budget for education is 2%.
It's like 2%. The whole national budget.
It's 2% of the whole federal budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's 2%.
Okay.
Medicare and Social Security are the highest percentages. They're at around a fourth. Military is at around 16. Education is at 2.
You know, there are some conservatives who want to get rid of public education, and I think that's in itself.
They want to get rid of
my goodness.
Education, you said?
Public education.
Okay.
Well, I mean, think about it. Go ahead.
So here's the thing: it's a catch-22 with that. So personally, I'm at a school. It's called Kalima Montessori. Shout out to Kalima Montessori. We go all the way up to high school now. But it is, and it is a private school, but it is a private school that enriches and cultivates our youth to be more beneficial to their own cause. Now, you don't get that in public school because you're just going to be trained. I was recently watching a video that said our public school system is actually mimicked off of something in 1700 Prussia. Right? It was like one of the worst things that we could have adopted from Prussia. And I know in the past, like we talk about standardized testing and how it actually impacts us differently than it does white kids. Going back to like the example for the SATs, where the creator made it just to try to prove white people were smarter, right? So here's the thing. I've recently been watching this woman named Dr. Barbara Sizemore. And now you would think getting rid of that standardized testing would be something that would benefit us. Now, on face value, I say yes, like get rid of it. It doesn't even really help us. But I think there maybe have to be something that's more relative to each group or to each places, like to each group's understanding or something like that, to actually test true intelligence, not a fake IQ test that's to make your other people look like they're dumber or inferior than what they really are. But what she was saying was that when people start pushing for them to get rid of these standardized tests, what's going to happen is you may not have a school that tries to help you to. The school may take that away, right? But that does not mean that colleges are going to sit there and say, you don't have to take this SAT. So therefore, like if you've never been I guess, trains or had experience with standardized tests, and now you trying to get into college, and these colleges are sitting there saying you still got to take this SAT, but you've never had that practice. Then how you think that's going to impact your children? So but I do also get, because she talked about how there was a whole article about back in the day. These are videos from the 90s, and she was saying there was an article where this guy was trying to say that there should be more private schools than public schools. But then when you have something like that, then you may have schools that are still training our children versus being actual beneficial to them. Like, for instance, like I would say Catholic schools for one thing. I'm not gonna say anything negative about the religion or anything, but there are people, and I know personal people, that have stories about the administration at Catholic schools that actually still played into that stereotype of them messing around with kids. So it's kind of like there's so many catch-22s when it comes to schooling that I don't personally have an answer to yet. All I know is I'm at a school trying to help out us, and that's what I love. But it's one of those things where you actually have to fully think about it. Is the private schooling better than public school, or should public school be fully reformed? Should we take away standardized testing? But if we do, what's the repercussions of it? What exactly, like on face value, you may be like, yeah, that's cool, go ahead and take that out. Or that's cool, go ahead and make more private schools or charter schools. But what will be the impact? Like you said with Obama, like you won't see that impact till 50 years later.
But I'm saying, so if we take away public education, what do all the poor black children or the poor black and white children across the nation do? Like, just not get educated? Do we have an educated, completely uneducated mass? Even though I don't necessarily agree with the curriculum of schools or how it may operate, but I think public education is something that's necessary, free and public education, for operating society.
I agree with that too, Jalen. And I think I'm going out on a limb here, but I think trade schools or entrepreneurial programs should be expanded for kids to get actual skills and experience with a specific trade and with understanding how business works. I think that the curriculum should fundamentally be revised to teaching like actual skills that people need like in life, as far as like, personal finances, taxes, debt, credit, equities, all of this. There's no reason that you could actually even graduate from college and not know about some of this stuff if you're not a business major. There's no reason. I agree with equipping kids to be able to have certain mathematical competencies, understanding history, but I think we should fundamentally be teaching like models for how to think, and not focus as much on just the content, but more so the approach of thinking, and then fill that in with, okay, hey, here's specific information, but we want to teach you how to learn or how to think first. I don't think that's happening. And I think kids could get a lot more out of education if it was geared towards, really, really serving them more as an individual, and not just schools as institutions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It really sucks that schools are a business. That's the real thing that bothers me at the end of the day.
And look, Marcus said UGA showing that schools are just as greedy as oil.
Man, you know what? The president of UGA by trade is an attorney.
Right. But man, when I first realized, I was like,
did you know?
Never been a professor, never been in the actual school systems, but he gets to become president.
Because everything's political.
And if you ask him why, he'll say, yeah, it's because of how I think about problems.
Yeah, thinking. They don't teach how to think.
He gonna do what Kent want him to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bureaucratic systems in UGA politics.
Actually, hey, would you mind sharing your insight on that from what you went to?
I was a part of this program called Lead Fellowship. So it's leaders engaged in affirming diversity. Honestly, now that I like reflect on it, it definitely is a performative organization because we had to basically meet all of like all admin of UGA, like president, vice provost, dean of students, like all those admins. And we had to come to them being our representative body. Like there was a Latino LGBTQIA plus person who was on there. There was someone that identified as intersex. Like we were just all supposed to represent the body, like the voice or the communities of people who might have concerns on UGA. So we were that body. Like it was like 5 of us. And most of the times when we would talk to them, we were like, so this is happening, but you guys did this. Like, what are y'all doing? They would say, oh, like, it's above us. Like every time they said something, it was like, it's above us. They're like, it's the bureaucracy of it. They're like, we're not, it's almost as if they're like figureheads. They're like, in order for us to create change, y'all students have the most power. We don't. And I'm like, so why are y'all, in my head, we're wondering like, so why are you admins? Like, but they're like, it always goes back to like, it goes back to who you vote for. Like, they're like, because they're a public school in Georgia, they're like, it goes back to who you vote for. Because the governor has hands in UGA. Like, it's not, they're like, it's not us making these policies. It's the state officials who make these policies. So I was like, oh, okay. So why are we talking to you? We should be talking to them.
Right.
So yeah, y'all need to be our advocates now. Y'all need to help us out. Exactly, if we the students, right? Look at what y'all saying.
Exactly. So that was just
wow.
Shout out to Dakota.
Wow.
Last comment, Jerry Moorhead.
They could all agree with that one.
What did he say?
What's up,
Jerry Moorhead is there you go.
Wow.
But just to kind of tie this back into the book, Angela talks about in this chapter, she talks about how she wants to express the concern that our collective relationship to history in this country is seriously flawed, and how the schools kind of, perpetuate that. And how I know we've talked before about how like we're not really taught true history. And let's see, I took a couple of notes about that. But she talks about how we're taught about the civil rights movement and how it's kind of, it's made it seem like that was the end all be all in our fight for freedom. But she also talks about how freedom needs to be economic freedom. We need educational freedom. We need freedom of healthcare, and we need the freedom of housing. And she even talks about the Black Panther Party and how their points kind of outline these type of issues. And you would think that those things are a thing of the past, but they're really just as relevant to our democracy today.
Past is present.
She talks about that in here too, right?
Yeah.
Angela goat, man. And she says she says that people in this country are still unaware of the fact that former slaves brought public education to the South. And because in that time, education was equivalent to liberation, and there was no liberation without education. So when I hear conservatives talking about, we need to end public education, it's like, what does that really mean to, Black and poor people, not even just Black people, but poor people across the country, especially.
Mm-hmm.
They want a more ignorant, controlled population.
Yeah. I like how Coda mentioned. He basically brings back up your point, Kenny, about basic arithmetic and knowledge of history. I really want people, if anybody on here doesn't really like history or not, when I read about history and going back to Dr. Amos Wilson, he actually says something about like, what's the purpose of education? And essentially it's for survival of your people, or to benefit your people and to progress, to move on and elevate, right? If your education isn't giving you that, then your education is failing you. And I don't think people actually know how to use history, because again, it's just like the financial markets. Like if you're looking at stocks and you want to learn more about stocks, you got to look at the past of it. You have to look at what it did in the drop. Like if you want to go on basic stocks, you want to look at the companies that during repression or depression or during this COVID, don't sell, like during situations where it is a bearish market, you want to look and study that, so then you know how it may project in the future, how it's going to bounce back, which companies are actually going to be able to thrive through that and make it. So the same thing that we should do in like real life, where when we're looking at our situations, like I tell people, we have these same conversations that were happening 200 years ago. The more I read, I'm realizing like people have been having literally the same exact conversations 200 years ago. But then we keep on bringing up the same type of solutions as if we haven't learned from the history. Therefore, they're not really actually teaching history like how you really should learn it. Like it's not teaching you how to actually analyze it, to actually learn how to maneuver now to project the future you actually want to see. And we're not actually teaching we don't have an education that actually helps us survive. Like on one of my Instagram videos where I posted, and this comes from Amos Wilson as well, he just talked about how our education system, it's mediocre. And if you actually look at, like, you can look at the stats now, we're nowhere near the top 10. We're not the top 5. Like,
we're decreasing.
Yeah, we're decreasing. So, and then we're sitting there thinking that we're the best, but our education system is mediocre. So he kind of makes the point of, like, if our system isn't giving us that education needed to help us survive, thrive, and progress, then something needs to change, or we need to start cultivating the inner genius in our own children, because as we see, like we just now talked about, it's a business, it's more profitable. Like Haven said, it's trying to keep you in a more ignorant state just to control you. Like this, and if anybody's watching this think that ain't real, then maybe I don't want to assume about your intelligence or anything, but I would have to say, try to ponder on that. Think about that. Think about if you've ever actually had to think about these reasons why we're not taught about money, or why we're not really taught about certain things in history. Like, just think about it.
was really telling of that too, of what you're not taught. If you learn what other communities are doing with their money and how they pool their resources. And I'm not saying that we don't do this, but I'm just saying when you learn what white people are doing with their money as far as taxes go, or as far as trusts go, as far as life insurance plans go, these are all things you should look into too. But yeah, it's something that it had to be learned, and it came from somewhere. If it didn't come from your family, it came from somebody that taught you. And quick little tidbit on that. My grandma, we were talking about history, and we were talking about Brown versus Board of Education. I think that was, don't get me the lying, but I think that was in 56. I want to say this was around the time she was in school. And I asked her, I said, where did you, like, I know she went to, what are all the places that she went to school, and was it like from the state? And she said, well, growing up, the churches had schools that were the pastor and the church provided the teacher, and the church sponsored the school. And I've actually been to the location where her school is located behind her church. Like, they still go to that church to this day, by the way. But it's literally it's a room, and they had all grade levels in there, and that was how they did. But what's that also saying to me? It was to say that, oh, your state and your city sponsored schools weren't available for Black people, right? So it was like, hey, we're not integrating. So before Brown versus Board, it was like, we're not integrating, and the state is paying for the public education of our kids. And since we're not integrating, y'all got to figure that out. Y'all got churches, y'all can figure out this whole education thing. So it was like, we had to do it. We had to educate ourselves. But says two things, that we had to take control of our education, but then two, we weren't recognized as being worthy of education by the state. Like that was very telling to me, and it's crazy to be able to talk to your grandparents and hear this type of stuff, really be able to see how things really were through their lens. This is somebody that's 2 generations removed from you, and that was, that's something that is important to me.
But it puts it in that context that it wasn't really that far away.
It wasn't really that long ago.
So I took a course and called the New Jim Crow, and my professor was telling me that even though it was passed in 1956, Brown versus Board of Education,
54.
It was 54. Okay.
He said many schools didn't even desegregate until the 70s. Like they passed it, but nobody was pushing the legislatures. Like nobody was making sure that these schools desegregated.
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. So even until the 70s, like people, all black people went to all black school. Like they weren't even integrated into the other schools. And I just wanted to highlight one of Marcus's comments where he said, I think Angela tells us to think deeper and buy into the idea of a better America. If we revise the curriculum and structure, we'll have a better prepared nation. And it just made me think about what Angela said.
Good word.
She said that healthcare, housing, and education have become a commodity. Like they've become a way for people to make money. It's been so thoroughly commoditized that many people don't even know how to understand the very process of acquiring knowledge because it's subordinated in the future capacity to make money. So,
so here we go again.
Education and affordable housing isn't, within the interests of these capitalists and the people that run the country. I think it's just a tough thing to fight against.
Man, what we're fighting is our discomfort, man. Like, because essentially we're saying that people who only believe in capital markets are jeopardizing social cares, right? And what it would take to really challenge that is thinking outside of a capitalist realism. It's thinking money can't be the first priority in that situation, because if we're looking at how money attaches itself to anything that is perceived of having value, and we look at what that does to how we judge it or use it, it completely alters how we process that. You see what I'm saying? Like capitalism attaches itself to things and ultimately pimps it out because it makes it about how much I can make off of it and how much I can profit, as opposed to what's the correct distribution or allocation of this resource, right? And so, in these situations in education, like that's why I said, here we go again. It's like, okay, here we go again. We've got to make education profitable for you to even acknowledge providing that as a service or providing that as an infrastructure or institution. Now we have to make education a good idea. Yeah. Like what?
It's 'cause they don't want educated people, man. They just want clones that are gonna go to work.
You mind highlighting Dakota's last comment there? The one where he says, all right, so he says, you consider the phrase knowledge is power. It's easier to control or oppress an uneducated or ignorant population. I don't know about if anybody on here is aware of a man named Steve Biko, but he was like the Malcolm X of South America. Thank you. South Africa, my bad. Of South Africa. He was somebody who also inspired Nelson Mandela. And one of his most powerful quotes is, the most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So that touched it right in on that quote that Dakota put up there, right there. Like, I think if you don't even have control of your own mind in its conditions, that's your oppressor's weapon at the end of the day.
Even in fact, when Angela Davis has a quote where she says, deprivation of ancestry affects the present and the future. The fact that we don't even know the history of our ancestors, in terms of like the lens of like we only know like America. I feel like that's power in itself as well.
The masses.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even even being aware of and beware of the mythology. So like I think there's a danger in thanks Kanisha. But yeah, there's a danger in, I think, like listening to a certain mythology, and what history and education provides is a certain mythology for the story and the narrative that we associate with our experience as Black people and our experience in America. And controlling the mythology and controlling the narrative. I know, 2020 changed the narrative, everyone knows about that, but I think the power in that kind of phrase is like, hey, let's really challenge what certain narratives are. And even if you look at, and I'm, this is just a reality. The Dahomey tribe in Africa, there's a book that a friend was telling me about. Is I'm gonna slaughter the name, Barako, but it's a book that talks about, a mythology outside of what we may buy into as Black Americans, and how this tribe was known in, transporting and selling slaves to Europeans. And I'm not saying that to justify anything else, but it's knowing the diversity of actual facts that exist and really trying to investigate and come up with a more truthful and, accurate narrative for where we actually sit in history, like understanding, okay, that dang, this is really how we got here. And then, hey, we really got to be intentional in taking these steps to, navigate away,
And I think there's this misconception that, racism is over and Black people are free. But Angela says near the end of the chapter, there are more Black people incarcerated and directly under the control of correction agencies now than there were Black people enslaved in 1850. So
oh man.
how far?
Yeah, so I don't know, man. Okay? When we schedule to talk about this, or whenever this comes up, or we can talk about it now. But she talks about so I think it was it chapter 9 or chapter 10? Let's see here. Give me a second here. It's gonna take me a second. So it's chapter 9 or chapter 10, but I think it's chapter 10 actually. So she talks about, hey, political movements from 1960s up until now, but she also goes back, and maybe she mentions this earlier in the book actually, but what you're saying during Reconstruction period. So after the Civil War and doing radical Reconstruction, Black people held the most office that they ever held.
Yeah.
But due to the emergence of things like the fugitive slave law and Black codes, and lynching got very big in the 1880s. It got even bigger after Blacks were technically free. So it was like we got this opportunity. And what's been interesting, this is what I want to say, and then I'll come back up. What's been interesting is having learned history as a kid and understanding that mythology or that narrative, growing older, and then going back and intentionally going back after I've lived some experience in life as an adult and a person, and saying, wow, here's what my experience was. Let me go back again actually and look at how some of these things lined up. So when we talk about radical Reconstruction, or, the place of the Black person, we talk about the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s, the Progressive Movement, World War I, World War II, the 1920s, and all of that. And you get to the 1960s, and it's like, oh, wow, this is finally a time for us to make some real progress, right? So let's look at the timeline. And I think she mentions some things about this, but the Civil Rights Act of 64, 65, Malcolm, the Black Panther Party started in 66. After that, Malcolm X was killed, I want to say in, is it 65 or 67? MLK was killed in 68. All of these things followed. The Vietnam War was, at its height. All of these things followed what was supposed to be a real point of progress for us. The war, the Civil War, was supposed to free was technically supposed to free black slaves. It was a war over slavery, even though it's really a war over economy, commerce. But even then, we were worse off, huh?
We
That was
were the
us.
economy. That's the thing.
Yeah.
We were. Oh wow, good point. Good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like Angela she kind of goes back through history and talks about, okay, hey, you know, after the 1960s, like during the 1960s, up until the 1960s, these movements all the way up until the Obama age. And, you know, it's just interesting to kind of look at these points throughout history and see, like, when I really look at these dates and the events in context, it's like, man, that's really what was going on. That's really how they was feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like,
And
wow, you
I think they
know?
push the narrative of like, you know, radical reconstruction and the civil rights movement and like racial progress, but they don't push the white resistance that immediately followed radical reconstruction. Was that what you were talking about? The slave laws, the black codes, the vagrancy laws, the pig laws, the convict leasing, the lynchings,
Convict leasing, man.
the white resistance after, you know, black people got free isn't really emphasized in the same way. So you wouldn't really even understand the impact.
I want to bring up something we talked about earlier with our tools of analysis in All African People's Revolutionary Party, bro. With number 4 and 5, when he said, "Always look for the new and the old. Always look for the old and the new." So, Kenny, you bringing up the being about economy, and the thing is, we were the economy. Like, fun fact, futures trading is actually from the transatlantic slave trade. Like, that started way back then, where
oh my goodness,
they would try to, like, I don't know, yeah, they would try to estimate how many actual ships or bodies would actually make it over the transatlantic slave trade, and it was kind of like placing that bet in that future stock. Like, we were the future stock. But just to relate it to now, again, also fun fact, the stock market actually rises every time there's a major black death. Like, there's actually studies on that. So again, that's actually connecting that old to the new. But one of the things that she also talks about consistently throughout this book is the G4S company. And she mentioned how she said G4S is the largest corporate employer on the entire continent of Africa. Now, this is the corporate employer, and the majority of people in Africa are Black Africans. So that is Black Africans being employed by their oppressor to actually oppress more Black people. But the way I correlate that to the old and the new and the new and the old is the same with what you just now said with that Barako or Baraka. I'm butchering it. But
yeah, I did. I know I did too.
But it's the same thing. Like, these are still hiring or having contracts or bringing in indirect rule or using the African people there to oppress their own people, using the Barako tribe or the Barako people to actually capture more Black people to that transatlantic slave trade. So it's like nothing's new, but it is new. So it's like, always look for the new and the old. Always look for the old and the new.
That's interesting. Tools of analysis. That's interesting. I think that's a cool way of kind of like assessing the information, handling this information.
Yeah, bro, we gotta have an episode on this stuff, man. It's dialectical materialism and dialectical historical materialism. Like, it's actually.
Oh, that's tight. Yeah, that's tight.
What are you saying? My bad. You said that's tight or that's light?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that's tight. No, not that's light. No.
yeah.
You say that's light? Who is this?
You off, my bad.
No, it's cool. I think that's necessary for like really looking at information and seeing, okay, how do we sort through this how do we organize the information? How do we divide up these concepts? How do we really get more of a critical view at what we're looking at? You know, the sequence of events, what's the content, the context, you know, and the content, what does this break into any categories, you know, all of that. I think that's essential for really being able to use education for liberation.
Yeah. Education for liberation. Putting actions into
Yeah.
solutions. The motto.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it would be cool if we
Yes, sir.
actually maybe gave people sometime in the future just a short spill of what AAPRP is and see if people want to potentially get them. I think it falls in line with what we do here at Unlocked.
Yeah. And
Cool. Yeah.
there'll be a good chance to actually teach people how to, like, we're learning as well, but how to actually use those tools of analysis to move forward for a more beneficial, productive culture within our people.
And how to organize people for the purpose of revolution and change. That's kind of what we're learning.
Man. Yeah.
So y'all want to get into this last chapter for a little bit? I know we're reaching that 2-hour mark that we like to stay at. Is there anything that stood out to y'all in this last chapter that y'all want to discuss?
Yeah, I had mentioned some of it, but yeah, give me a second.
I think I mentioned something.
I have one quote at the very end where she said, "There's a difference between outcome and impact. Many people assume that because the encampments are gone and nothing tangible was produced, that there was no outcome. But when we think about the impact of these imaginative and innovative actions and these moments where people learn how to be together without the scaffolding of the state, when they learn to solve problems without succumbing to the impulse of calling the police, that should serve as a true inspiration for the work that we would do in the future to build these transnational solidarities." And for the ones that may not have had the opportunity or the privilege to get the book in time or to have the time to actually even sit down and read, throughout this book, she's just been mentioning our relationship between our brothers in Palestine and our connection with them. And the company I just mentioned was a pure connection between our oppression, with how G4S helps the Israeli military and government oppress the Palestinians, and how that same company also trains our police here in the United States to oppress us and put us in a police state. I think that it's important for us to actually realize the global context of our plight, of our struggle, of our fight for freedom, because we're not alone. And as I think W.E.B. Du Bois mentions in a speech a long time ago, where he talks about how, like, we never really, back then, we never really got the chance to actually study other cultures or other societies that were fighting for liberation. Like, for instance, communism was an example of some society trying to create something different. And he was like, but as soon as we mentioned communism, y'all basically made it seem like that was an evil word or something. So we never actually got to study it. So it kind of separates.
Right.
And
Interesting.
makes it where we don't even get to, basically putting us in the same situation of Vietnam, where like we fighting our own Vietnamese brothers over there. Like we didn't know nothing about Vietnam, but went over there saying we fighting for democracy, and they didn't even want us there. So I feel like it's very important to have a global context whenever we are actually thinking about freedom, struggle, and understanding you're not alone and other people are also oppressed. I know as Black people in America, sometimes it can feel that way, but that is when we're stuck in this American microcosm of the world, not realizing that some of the things that we even do contribute to the oppression of other people across the world. And so I really enjoyed this entire book. I liked how she related everything, related us to people across the world. I like to always mention 6 degrees of separation and how we're always connected to people across the world. That was like my last quote from the book for myself.
Yeah. Some of my comments on that intersect with my personal experiences too. Just the last chapter. What you laughing at, Zach?
Mark, you put in.
Oh.
You didn't get to the last topic yet.
But yeah, so I won't ruin it. But yeah, basically it intersects with my experience as well. Speaking to other people from like other countries and whatnot, and realizing that like oppression exists in a lot of places in the world. um Miss Davis uses examples from Israel, like you said, Turkey,
Greece.
Europe as well, Middle East, yeah, Eastern Europe, even to the extent of, so communist in US, so the Berlin Wall, the Eastern Bloc, Western Europe, democracy, communism, socialist nations, all of these warring ideologies that bring nations and people to conflict. And it's essentially it's a call to action in a lot of ways. And I think the reason why she has this chapter as the last chapter, she's obviously saying like, we're not alone in our struggle, we're not alone in our pursuit. The people in Turkey and people in Israel, there is and even South America too as well, there's oppression that exists, and there are examples of people coming up against that oppression. And even in the foreword, they talk about this in Cornel West, I think it's Cornel West, talk about understanding like that freedom is a constant struggle and other people are going through it as well. And there are examples when the powers that be have been brought down by resistive force. And being a part of this system to some degree requires our belief in the system, or our disbelief in being able to dismantle it. And she calls out to other nations and her experience with oppression in other nations, like Marc Lamont Hill does as well, to build this case for, hey, this is something we're going to be doing. It's going to be something that's continual. It's something that other people are doing, and it's been continual for them too.
Exactly. Yeah. You got any last remarks, Jalen, as well?
Yeah, I think just a couple of things that stood out to me in this chapter was when she was talking about genocide and how they decided they had it seemed like a meeting to define what genocide was, and they wanted to place the history of Black Americans within the context of genocide, and there was resistance to it, although it fell within the definition. And I think that it just relates to how Donald Trump now, they're banning critical race theory, and there's resistance to the 1619 Project, which wants to place Black history within the context of white oppression and white violence, and how there's the resistance to that. And she talks about how a lot of struggles are so interconnected that we can't even talk about the history of slaves without talking about the history of Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what she wants to do throughout this book. Kind of like you were saying, Zach. That's what I mean, not Zach. I'm sorry, Kenny. Is why she places this book, this essay, where she does. And she points out that stories are not. They're all connected. They're not. They don't exist in isolation, and she just wants to make it evident that if we connect with people facing the same types of oppression as we do across the world, we can bring a global mass movement, rather than just doing it on a small basis in our own communities. And I think she leaves off with a couple. She says the greatest challenging facing us as we attempt to forge international solidarities and connections is understanding what feminists call intersectionality.
I was just getting to that part, bro. Yeah.
And she says not so much intersectionality of identities, but intersectionality of struggles. And I think that's really what she wants us to understand. And she says we have to go to great lengths. We cannot go on as usual. We cannot pivot the center. We cannot be moderate. We have to be willing to stand up and say no with our combined spirits, our collective intellects, and our many bodies. And that's how that's how we'll get change.
And on that point, Jalen, I do want to say, so okay, so she says that I think feminism provides methodical guidance for all of us who are engaged in serious research and organized activism work. Feminist approaches urge us to develop understandings of social relations whose connections often initially are intuited. This is also Zach, where she says the political is personal. I want to enter all this into evidence here. And okay, also, yeah, the point that you were saying earlier, Zach, as far as outcome being different from impact. So she's like kind of tying up the intersectionality of, like, you know, feminism and even the struggles that people have in other countries, or the oppression that people witness in other countries, such as Turkey, Israel, South America, Europe, as well, to basically say that we should be using, you know, these movements to learn from the mythologies of how people are evaluating social relationships. And I think the reason why she really puts that whole income and impact are different. She puts that's almost like her conclusion. And right before that, she mentions mega corporations, and she's going down through connecting all this intersectionality to mega corporations to, like, income is different from impact. And I think the point there is, like, outcome, not income. My bad. Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, I think she makes this point, like, outcome and impact is the difference we need to be focused on to really be able to, like, transcend, like, mega corporations being the entities that ultimately guide how we live our lives and how we conduct our social relationships and how we acknowledge and use our intersectionality to solve problems. So, like, that's a call to kind of transcend that by, you know, recognizing those differences.
Overall, I hope everybody that was joining us in this book enjoyed the book. I hope that y'all take any knowledge and information from this book and apply it to your life, because I don't think that anybody should be reading anything that doesn't impact them in some way or somehow. And spread the knowledge. Like, don't just hold it in. Like, spread any knowledge that you have to others, because I realize, like, one of the reasons why we start this is because we're trying to get more people to read. You know, we're trying to get more people to actually see the beneficial aspects of reading, and that you just, like, Twitter University is not gonna cut it for you, dog. So appreciate everybody reading this with us.
Yes, thank you to everybody who stuck around. I know people are jumping out right now, but you know, give us a thumbs up and share this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it, and, you know, tell somebody about what we do, and try to be involved in the next book that we read. So I think we should put out a poll probably on our Instagram. If you're not following us, it's Unlock TBC on IG. And we'll put out a poll and we'll get y'all input on what we should read next. But thank you for everybody who stuck around with us. We'll do this every other Sunday. And any last remarks? I think we're good.
Hey man, let's continue. It's constant. It's constant
struggle, man.
Yeah, constant struggle.
Yes, sir. Well, all right, y'all. Look out for that post probably tomorrow. Hopefully, I think we should have a book decided by maybe Wednesday, and we'll try to get y'all input on that as well. So in 2 weeks, we'll have a discussion on whatever book we decide next.
All right, Black Liberation.
All right.
Yeah. Definitely enjoyed chopping it up with y'all though. Always a pleasure. Good people, and, you know, we'll be talking.
Sure. All right, y'all. Cool. Keep it easy, man.
All right, man. Be easy.